Poor, deluded me, thinking that my thinking was helping. But what if the tool that I use to navigate the world is really just causing me more pain through constant self referencing? Yeah, right. As if my thinking 24/7 ever made anything go wrong. I mean, except maybe that time I missed that exit ramp while thinking about toothbrush design. Or maybe that time I left an pretty evil voicemail after I got all worked up about something. And I mean, seriously though, he should have known I was insulted by the way he pronounced facade. Everyone knows it's facade. In The Craving Mind, an audiobook I recently finished, Judson Brewer maps out how not only dopamine and rewards work, but how mindfulness or meditation can help dismantle the addiction to our self-referential delusions. When we actually think about ourselves, there's a story we are telling ourselves. This activates a certain portion of the DMN, the default mode network, and this can be tracked using fMRI technology. What's also interesting is that when we think about ourselves, it triggers a little dopamine hit. Even when we're daydreaming, which we do apparently for half the day, this gives us a little dopamine buzz. And when your phone chimes to tell you a very special message involving very special information specifically for you, when that arrives, oh, yeah, that's just crack for a mammalian brain. And we know dopamine gets us addicted. We've all watched the shows and seen The Social Dilemma and all these other things. Well, most humans are, of course, addicted to their phone, but the thing less often criticized is that we're addicted to thinking. As part of our society, we champion intelligence. But you can be intelligent and thoughtful without doping yourself with the stories you tell yourself about yourself. So what does it look like to not activate the DMN and basically not compulsively think about yourself? Well, when we're effortlessly moving through life, disentangling ourselves from our own story and being present, part of the DMN, the PCC, the posterior cingulate cortex, it shows less activity or blood flow. Brewer shows us that this comes about through mindfulness, meditation, or actually just being engaged in a really novel task. During these times, we quite literally lose ourselves, our self-identification. In earlier research for my book, I stumbled across the work of Raphael Malik and some of his colleagues, and they're showing that when we're undergoing complex or novel tasks, our brain inhibits self-referencing. That is, we lose the observer function, the ability to observe ourselves and comment upon ourselves as an independent entity. So we lose ourselves. And this is precisely why I recommend a physical craft as a hobby, something that can be challenging enough to disrupt the constant feedback loop of self-indulgent narration and this kind of rumination loops we get caught up in. I mean, give yourself some peace of mind. Either meditate or make. Develop cycles where you're not you and give your ego monster a break. But back to it. So what's wrong with me thinking about me and daydreaming about me all the time, Ryder? Well, this increase in the PCC is also correlated with some negative behaviors that stem from self-reflective behavior. The more you self-reflect, the greater your tendency for repeatedly telling yourself the same stories. This is ruminative thinking, right? The more you cycle through choice justification, obsessive-compulsive disorder, induced moral behavior, and that nasty one, guilt. And all of this leads to higher incidence towards depression. Increased PCC behavior is a contraction of the self away from reality. You're not open, you become closed. You're a closed loop of you controlling things and feeling guilty, and this makes it increasingly impossible for you to see reality. As Marcus Aurelius says, you are subject to sorrow, fear, jealousy, anger, and inconsistency. That's the real reason you should admit that you are not wise. So you become addicted to thought patterns, unable to disassociate from your thinking to see clearly. You have made your own story, and by golly, you're sticking with it. Truth be damned. Part 2. Another insight on individual ethical motivations comes from Jake Davis. This is also discussed in The Craving Mind. It's that when playing a game used in psychological research, the ultimatum game, it shows that people are willing to lose money or cause themselves pain to punish a perceived unfairness. In the game, participant A, usually a computer, offers to share funds with participant B, the subject. And people tend to get really angry and disgusted at all these unfair offers. By golly, only offered me 10% of the profit. You think I'm an idiot? I'll burn the building down and go to prison before taking 10%. Sir, please sit down. It's a computer you are screaming at. Dadgummit, it's the principle of the thing. This relative, contingent, subjective fairness bias means that we react negatively, hurting both parties to try to prove a point. So let me rephrase that. To prove a point, we hurt ourselves. We have a common sense notion of fairness. And when our subjective principles are challenged, we take it personally. We get angry and we lash out, hurting ourselves in the process. Now, what's the science behind this, Ryder? Well, the anterior insula, it's part of the brain that receives input from the thalamus and amygdala, but it also signals value judgments to the prefrontal cortex. This shows heightened activity during moments of emotion and disgust, which can be mapped through the fMRI. Yes, you can see by the flow state of the postcoital amygdala pituitary ancillar bipedal haberdashery, old boy. It's definitely a prefrontal flux capacitor. So what do we do to not let these brain parts rule our behavior? Well, they've proven that meditators or mindfulness practitioners are willing to accept more unfairness than others. They take it less personally by uncoupling emotional reactions, and therefore they don't react punitively. The text says, by seeing the lack of inherent reward in punishing the other participant, they decided not to follow through. Fairness aside, it is more painful to be a jerk than to be nice to someone. Jake Davis and Stephen Batchelor's research says that cultural ethics, our normative programming, which we might call common sense, it may be mistaken much of the time, leading to fear, anger, guilt, and pain. So following our common sense, these embedded principles, might be keeping our whole community in pain. However, on an individual level, mindfulness can be used to reduce subjective bias, pointing the way towards a common human ethic by empathizing rather than reacting from blanket codes of conduct, and allowing us to bypass or at least pause our innate tendencies of egoism and self-destruction. Part 3. So, yes, bypassing your own egoism and addictive thinking habits. Well, that sounds great, but really, so what? Is this just a struggle for you to be a better person, Ryder? What if you actually like who you are right now and how smart and how active your brain is? Yeah, Ryder. Tell us how much you love thinking, how it's your whole identity, and you even started a podcast about it. Well, of course, naturally for me, this struck home. And then Ryan Holiday sent out a podcast lately, and this puts this tendency to think in a larger perspective. And I'm going to pair that with a bit of wisdom gleaned from the Living Philosophy YouTube channel. You know a lot, and when people ask, you have an answer. And even when you don't answer, you have a conclusion, a judgment. Your knowledge and instinct has gotten you far. But it may actually be a form of stupidity, ultimately a form of misery. In a short story here, the scholar Taku-san, full of opinions and knowledge, came to Ryutan and asked about Zen. At one point, Ryutan refilled his guest's teacup, but he did not stop pouring when the cup was full. Tea spilled over and ran over the table, and Taku-san says, "Stop, the cup is full." "Exactly," says Master Ryutan. "You are like this cup. You are full of ideas. You come and you ask for teaching, but your cup is already full. I can't put anything in. Before I can teach you, you have to empty your cup." All our hoarding are infovore tendencies. These prevent us from learning. Of course, it's great. We can all spit facts and cite scholars and rattle off stats. Not to be too egoistic, but sometimes our friends and family also rely on us to think for them, to form ideas for them, and thus they don't really have to either learn or explore. They just lean on us. Our knowledge, our assuredness, it becomes a crutch, and we hold on to it and they hold on to it, and it not only does it hold you back, but it keeps those around you from participating in the journey of discovery as well. When we ask, when we remain open and curious, the world and people also open up. And that can show us more, and in the long run, teach us more. To become this way, we might have to become a bit more of a destroyer, breaking our long-held ideas on value and our role in the world, and in so doing, we not only learn more, but we move through this kind of Nietzschean cycle from being the camel stuffed with knowledge into the lion, the slayer of values, and on to the eternal child, the creator, which has to be so much more fun than being a smarty pants all the time. All right, thank you for your time. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review the show on whatever platform you're using. And if you're interested in the Nietzschean cycle of the camel, lion, child, or the destroyer, I'll put a video link to this great website from the Living Philosophy YouTube channel. Thanks.